Pastor Roger Kisto of the Loud Cry team, and this morning I'm just breaking off a little bit from the gradualism series to look at this subject, leaving the cities and the two sieges. And very quickly I want to burst into it because many people are questioning us what to do, where to go. They are seeing the crises, they are seeing the developments based on prophecy in the cities, and they are looking to hear God's voice. So I want to give some perspective on it. It will not be conclusive today. I would seek to do another part, but just listen with me and watch with me. So Christ gave this dual prophecy. He said in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, and Luke 21 really answers or gives breath to what is really meant. He says, when you therefore, that's verse 15, shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. That's a phrase, that's a place. Stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. So we want to see what that means. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains, and let him that is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. But Luke, the Gospel of Luke, the historian Luke and physician, he gave a little more breadth. He says in verse 20 of chapter 21, and when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Yeah, so you got the conclusion. When you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then you shall know the desolation is nigh, the same abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Then verse 21 says, let him that is in Judea flee to the mountains. Some of the same narratives. So how do we interpret that? The abomination of desolation standing in the holy place is the surrounding of Jerusalem, or the siege. All right, and we want to see what that means. So at first glance reading, one might assume that when the Roman armies were within the temple, inside of the temple, then it would be time to flee. But notice it said stand in the holy place. And then we have this famous statement from Great Controversy 25 that brings clarity. I hope that you are following. So my point is, Christ said in Matthew 24, the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. Luke interprets that to mean when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, it is time to flee. Okay, so let's see what happens. So then Mrs. White gives more breath to it. She says in Great Controversy 25 and paragraph 4, when the idolatrous standard of the Romans, the idolatrous standard of the Roman, or their flag, their emblem of conquering, should be set up in the holy ground. Now hear this now, because previously I said that many interpret this to mean that when the emblem, the idolatrous standard, is placed within the temple. But she says, when the idolatrous standards of the Romans should be set up in the holy ground, in the holy place, in the holy ground, which extended some furlongs outside the city walls, then the followers of Christ were to find safety in flight. Christ said it this way, that those that are in Judea are to flee. Those that are on the housetop are not to come down. Those that are in the field. So it is the exact same thing, but it says it extended for furlongs outside the city walls. So imagine with me now, you had the city walls, the emblem or the idolatrous standard, the abomination that maketh desolate, was not planted at that siege, that is siege number 1, in the temple, but it was planted in what was considered the holy ground, furlongs, and a furlong is 660 feet outside of the city. So, and this was in the year AD 66 under a Roman general called Cestius. He besieged the city, and mysteriously, there's a lot of account in it in that first chapter of Great Controversy, read it. But what happened is that he mysteriously, providentially, he was diverted and distracted, and this was the sign for the people of God to leave. So follow with me now, my dear people. The siege came in AD 66. This was what Christ spoke about in the abomination that maketh desolate, Matthew 24:15, and in Luke 21:20, where he speaks about the surrounding of Jerusalem. So under Cestius in AD 66, this occurred, and as soon as God's providence allowed them to turn back from pursuing after Jerusalem, they fled, and the people of God were able to escape, the Christians, and we are told that no Christian died in that siege. However, in AD 70, under Titus, terrible were the calamities that fell upon Jerusalem. So look at it now. That was also a siege. Quoting directly from the spirit of prophecy, it says, terrible were the calamities that fell upon Jerusalem when the siege was resumed by Titus. And the Jews suffered terrible calamities in the second siege. So therefore, the first siege by Cestius was aborted. That was the time. So I am concluding that we cannot wait until it gets to a boiling point before we decide to think about moving. The move is, and we will see it in a while, in our time, how do we interpret that? And then this famous statement from Maranatha 180, it is now going to be clarified based upon the aforementioned thoughts. It reads, I quote, "The time is not far distant when, like the early disciples, we shall be forced to seek refuge in a desolate and solitary place. As the siege of Jerusalem by the Roman armies was the signal for flight to the Judean Christians, and that siege was in AD 66. It was the first siege. Something took place before the second siege. The second siege was the calamity. It was really the abomination that would have made desolate. They gave up God, and a desolation came. It says, so the assumption of power on the part of our nation, the United States in brackets, in the decree enforcing the papal Sabbath will be a warning to us. It will then be time to leave the large cities preparatory to leaving the smaller ones for retired homes in secluded places among the mountains." So even in the moves, there are two moves, from the large to smaller cities, and then from the smaller cities to the mountains. You won't be able to carry any pots or pans. God himself will take care of his people. So the question is, have we approached that time? Yeah, with the first siege, because it is assumed that this is speaking about just the setting up of the papal Sabbath. But we will notice in the first siege, there was some time given between that first act of planting the idolatrous standard, which is really the papal Sabbath, and the destruction of Jerusalem, which was the desolation as a result of the abomination. So the question again, have we approached this time? What is this assumption of power by the US? Are we in that realm? And can we wait until the second siege before we decide to move? I'm going to leave those thoughts percolating in your minds. I would love to hear from you. And next time, hopefully soon, I'm going to give another induction into this issue of the second siege and the time for God's people to move. So my name is Pastor Roger Kister. Have a wonderful and godly day, a day of thinking, projecting, and introspecting. God bless you until such time.